Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. The Other Way. Let's watch.
It's expensive.
That's okay. Don't worry.
I have a really bad neck and a bad back. I broke my neck in a car accident, and 7 days later, I was rear-ended again, going home from the hospital. So I deal with pain on a daily basis, but the flight here has just taken a toll, and it is really, really bad.
Oh, Kris has had a string of bad luck throughout her life. She has narcolepsy, her house burned down. She is a lesbian that was born in a Bible Belt, as she puts it, in a small town that doesn't allow her to be that way, or it's very difficult to be that way. So, I just feel so bad for Kris. And now we're learning that not only does she have the bad luck of having broke her neck in a car accident, but on the way home from the hospital, she was hit again. The pain that I think she's under is, if you've ever had pain, chronic pain, and maybe back pain in particular, but really just chronic pain, you know what this is like. It is, I have a broken bone in my back from football when I was growing up, and basically I hit someone so hard, I was crouching down, and if you're a football fan, I was middle linebacker, and the running back was doing a sweep around the end, and I dashed out there to meet him, and then at the line of scrimmage, we both sort of turned, and we both went boom, and our backs went snap like this. And in that process, it's the theory of the physicians back when I was in high school that's what broke, because I didn't sustain any kind of direct hit on the back that I could remember. I only remember there's just one, it was just like clack like that, and that snapped some bones in my back that are still broken, by the way, and it causes, they call it a defect, but it basically means that my whole spine is like all kind of pushed forward in a certain way, and my vertebrae are actually touching. And there was a time, and thank God I don't have any symptoms now, but there was a time about, 5-7 years ago, where I was in chronic pain in my lower back and down my legs because of the pinched nerve, and it would flare up over time. It would get worse, it would get better, and it was pretty mild. Like, they ask you to rate it on a scale from 1 to 10, and I would say that it was probably like a 3 or a 4 or something. And that sounds like, oh, what's the big deal? When you have any kind of pain, it's annoying, but usually when you have pain, like say your cat scratches you across the arm and it hurts, you usually can bank on that pain being transient. Maybe it lasts for a day, but it goes away. When you have chronic pain, it's the rest of your life. And you also, often it's the rest of your life. And also, you don't know if it's going to get worse. And you don't know when it's going to happen. You don't know when it's going to flare up. You don't know when it's going to... And it is demoralizing. Because pain, we evolved to avoid pain. We evolved to pay attention to pain. We evolved to be very concerned with pain. We evolved to have a lot of stress hormones and a lot of upsettedness in terms of our emotions when we feel pain, because usually, under most circumstances, or at least the circumstances that we evolved within, I suppose, there are moments of pain and then we want to run away. A snake bites us and we register it as pain and we get away from the snake. We are, we fall out of a tree and we hurt ourselves, and then from then on we avoid falling out of a tree. Pain is a signal of avoid, 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 and the way that the body evolved to motivate us to avoid is to experience tremendous focus and discomfort upon feeling pain. But if you're feeling pain 24/7 in your constant focus, and this is where a lot of pain management comes into play. We've found over time, because originally we just threw pills and compounds and medication at it because there was this myth or hope somehow that all these pain medications would, you just take a bunch of pills and it would just take it away. And I'm not saying that medications can't be a part of a rational, healthy regimen of pain management. It often is. But often what people find is that the medications, one, there are side effects, but two, you can become tolerant of the medication such that you need more and more and more of the medication to get an effect. There's also an intoxicating effect. There's an addictive effect, of course, and this is where a lot of the heroin and fentanyl deaths and addiction come from, is that people will have pain, or they'll have chronic pain, and they'll be given medications. They'll become dependent on the medication, not only because of the pain, but also because of the emotional effects. While I'm on this topic, I've talked about this before, but one of the most common roads to heroin and fentanyl addiction, heroin addiction will lead to eventual contamination or even potentially seeking fentanyl, which, someone that I don't know, but an acquaintance of mine just lost their son to fentanyl death. And it's a very common thing. I think everyone understands this, but it's a huge problem in our society in the United States, and I don't know, maybe other societies as well, but it's happening all the time. And I think because people just don't care about this, or it's stigmatized, or families are ashamed of it, that it just doesn't get talked about enough. So I want to raise awareness of that. And a part of that is I treated heroin addicts and people with similar addictions. I was a clinician in a agency that was specialized in treating addictions, and I was the resident clinician who provided the psychological treatment, the psychotherapy, and the assessments, the testing of personality and other kinds of things, and diagnosing and that kind of thing. And I worked in tandem with the drug and alcohol folks. Anyway, point is that in that time I learned a lot about addiction in general, but particularly heroin addiction, because it's pretty debilitating. And one of the things that I often found, if not always, was that the road is that someone was traumatized growing up, and they have a lot of difficulty with emotions. They feel emotional pain. They have relational reactivity with people. They are plagued at night, they're falling asleep with thoughts of shame or worry about the future. There's just a lot of emotional difficulty, but, they survive. They have jobs, they have families, and they get through life, but it's hard for them, and there's a lot of struggle. And they maybe even go to therapy, but the therapy didn't help. But a lot of people never went to therapy because they didn't know, or they don't have access, or they don't think they have time, or they don't have the money or something. Then they have a wisdom tooth pulled, or they twist their ankle playing soccer, and they go to the physician. This is more in the past. They don't do this anymore as much, at least in Seattle, where they would prescribe a pain medication, OxyContin, this kind of stuff, right? And the patient takes the medication, and there's a relief with the physical pain usually, which is what it's for. But there's also a relief of the emotional pain. The individual is like, whoa, I mean, it's great that my ankle doesn't hurt anymore, but I'm relaxed. I'm not in my head all the time. I can work more freely. I can date, or I can hang out with my family, and I don't get triggered. I'm just like, okay, for the very first time in my life, I'm relaxed. Usually I have to drink alcohol to kind of get this feeling, but I'm intoxicated, and I can't drink all the time, of course, but this pill is amazing. And they might register it consciously, they might not, but then they take more pills. Then the prescription runs out because they only had a prescription for a week, and then the day comes when they don't have it, and all of those negative feelings come rushing back. And they're like, whether they register this consciously or not, they're just like, I need to get those pills. So they either consciously do this, or unconsciously they go to the physician and they say, my ankle still hurts. And the physician's like, oh, okay, well, here's another prescription. Take the pill. They're like, yes, that's what's going on. This pill is saving my life emotionally. I've never felt relaxed until I took this pill. I've never felt as good. I've never felt optimistic about the life. I've never felt myself until I took this pill. And the issue here is that if you don't have those traumas, if you're not living in a state of ongoing emotional pain, then when you take these painkillers, like myself, I was raised relatively trauma-free, and when I was prescribed these medications, when I had my wisdom teeth pulled, by the way, I only had 2 wisdom teeth. You're supposed to have 4, right? But I had like one up here and one down here, and I either I'm a mutant that is completely weird, or I'm more evolved. I'm less caveman or something. Anyway, so when I was prescribed those medications, it took away the pain, but that's all that it did for me. It didn't take away anything else. It didn't make me feel any sort of euphoria or relief of ongoing chronic emotional pain. So I didn't become addicted. It just was this thing that I took for a few days. In fact, I think I only took one or two, and I was just like, yeah, I'd just rather live with the pain. It's not that big of a deal. Whereas, again, people with ongoing emotional pain, they're extremely at risk of when they take this pill, they're just like, oh my God. And so, and by the way, this could happen with alcohol, this could happen with marijuana, less so. But with painkillers, this is very common as an experience. And so the individual down the road, they start to extend that maybe another month. They're like, hey, my ankle, it's actually hurting more. Sometimes the somatic system of the brain can actually induce more pain, notice more pain, because the self is just like, we need this medication. So you better feel more pain or else we're going to run out of this pill. That can happen too. Or the individual will just lie because they know that they're addicted, or they know that, or they love the benefits. They love the fact that they could go through the day without hating themselves all day and without feeling terrible about themselves. And so they will lie to the physician. And in the past, it was, and in some communities, and there was an accusation with Rite Aid recently that I think was something along these lines, some sort of legal action against them. And don't quote me on that, of course. I don't want to get sued. So I'm just quoting something that I heard on Philip DeFranco on YouTube. But anyway, I'm not quoting, I'm just vaguely remembering. Point is that there is corruption within this, in which either the patient or the physician or both will understand that there's no medical reason for the prescription, but people are making money and the person becoming addicted is getting their medication, and so this goes on. Well, eventually you either run out of physicians who will give you the medication, or you run out of money to pay for it. Sometimes you will take too much of it and you'll get zonked out. But with pills, it's pretty easy to dial in the dose because it's written on the medication. This pill has X amount of milligrams. And usually with these individuals, they're not trying to take too much. They're trying to take just the right amount. Sometimes they really want an intoxicating amount, but that's not usually the case. If that's the case, then often they have a lot of trauma or a propensity to try to seek experiences with substances, but that's another topic. But more often than not, what I would see is that people were really trying to dial in their dose just so that they could go to work, just so they could survive, just so that they could be present with their kids, just so that they could actually have energy to do their taxes and to go to the store and to sleep at night. They're not trying to get intoxicated. They're not trying to get high. They're just trying to survive. And then eventually they run out of the pills, or they run out of the money to buy it or something, or they lose their job because the pills are affecting their ability to work because they're not dialing the dose right or something. And then they reach a crisis because they need the pills. So what do? Well, they figure out, or they go on the dark web or something, and they figure out how to get these pills illicitly. So that's what they do usually. This is usually the path. And they start buying them on the dark web, or they find a drug dealer or something, and they start to buy them that way. Eventually, they run out of money in that realm as well, because those can be very expensive. And then they're introduced, or they figure out that heroin is actually much cheaper. That's why people often take heroin. They'd rather take these other drugs often, especially because these other drugs are regulated and manufactured by a legitimate company that actually dials in the exact amount of dosage, and so it's easier to make sure you're taking the right amount of dosage. Or sometimes it's injected. But with heroin, with street heroin, God knows what kind of dosage. God knows if it has any fentanyl in it that'll kill you, or other kinds of stuff, or it's cut with a bunch of other kinds of things that'll harm you. But because they don't have any alternative and they've run out of money and whatnot, they turn to that. So then they start taking that. What happens in the deaths often is either the fentanyl is included as a way of trying to cut costs on the drug dealers' end, usually, from my understanding. And the individual will take the same dose every day because they know how much they need to get by. But with the added contaminant, they end up taking too much and then they die. They overdose accidentally. Or they will realize that they have an addiction and they need to stop. And so with all addictions, the common path of recovery is you quit, you relapse, you quit, you take again for a couple of weeks, you quit. Usually there's a cycle like that. For example, for me, when I quit cigarettes when I was in my late 20s, I was smoking 1 or 2 packs a day throughout my early mid-20s and with my friends, and I did not like it. I remember at a certain point I was just like, every cigarette I'm smoking is just an annoyance. And what really kicked it off was that when I became a therapist when I was 26 years old, because I would be working as a therapist for 8-10 hours a day, and I'd have 8 clients, and I was used to smoking a cigarette every like 20-25 minutes. So I'd be feeding in the middle of a session, just going like, just wait till the end of the session. And then as soon as the session went in, I'd run outside. I worked at an agency. It was a house that was converted into an agency, and I'd run outside and I'd suck down a couple cigarettes, and then I'd just be like, this is not how I want to live my life. This is terrible. This is disgusting. It's cancer risk. It's smelly. It's annoying. I can't do my paperwork because I'm out here smoking a cigarette. I guess it's mildly embarrassing to have a therapist. I don't know. There's no shame in it. Whatever. Point is that's what really pushed me over the edge. Like, I got to quit. But it took me a long time. It took me 3 years. It took me 3 years. I was 29 by the time I finally quit. And I wasn't even sure if that was the final time that I was going to quit. I was like, well, I'm quitting again, and I'm instituting more. And that's the thing when you are trying to quit and you're trying to go through recovery, you have to iterate on your process. Every time I quit, I had to change the system. I was like, well, okay, well, that's what's messing me up. So I have to add this portion. I have to refrain from doing this and that. I have to include this support. And I didn't do any formal treatment. I didn't go to any kind of treatment program or anything like that. I was a therapist. I kind of just did everything to myself. And maybe if I had gone to a treatment program, it would have gone faster. It probably would have, in all honesty. But anyway, I'm so glad that I quit, though, because it was hard. And there was a certain point there where I thought, I'll never be able to quit. I'm just going to smoke the rest of my life. And that's just how it is. Anyway, so usually people will go on cycles of quitting and using as they're trying to quit. Well, what happens is because as someone's using heroin and all the other painkiller medications, the compounds, they become tolerant. So when originally they just needed 1 pill at the beginning, they needed literally like 20 or 30 pills a few years later. Or when they originally needed just a certain amount of heroin in their arm, now they need so much more in order to have the same effect. And their body is able to, depending on the situation, is able to process it such that it won't harm the individual because of that tolerance that is increased over time. They quit, and their tolerance starts to titrate over time. The tolerance starts to reduce. Then they have a relapse, say a few months later, after their tolerance has gone down. But cognitively, they're used to using a certain dose. So maybe they dial back a little bit. And sometimes a lot of people will manage. They'll be like, okay, my tolerance is probably down, so I probably should just start off with a little bit, and they manage the dose okay. The problem is some people don't. They will say, a common scenario for someone suffering from addiction is they'll have a breakup, or they'll have a bad day at work, or they'll have a conflict with a friend, or they'll be yelled at by a customer or something, and they have tremendous amount of emotional suffering. And because they were traumatized growing up, and because they've had various different addictions that they would turn to in order to mask and numb the emotions, they can't cope with the emotions, or they think they can't cope with the emotions is really the way to put it. And so they will turn to substances as a way of trying to cope. And so they run to heroin. And they're just like, I need to completely numb out. This is too much overwhelming. You're getting divorced, or you just got fired or something. And you're just like, I just need to numb out. And then they grab too much, and they maybe bring it back a little bit, but they don't bring it back enough. They inject. it's too much and they stop breathing and their heart stops and they die. That's how people die. So why am I saying all that? I'm saying all that because now there's a movement to try to reduce the amount of painkillers that are prescribed in situations where there are pain, because although physicians want to help you with your pain, they also don't want to put you at risk of going down that road because it's well understood. So as an example, I had a client who was addicted to painkiller medication. She hadn't transitioned to heroin. I don't know if she ever did or would be at risk of that, but she was in the illicit drug dealer Percocet market route, and she was trying to quit. And so she's at this treatment center with me, and I was in charge of her psychotherapy and her family therapy. And I was working real hard with her, and she was working real hard to be sober. And she was walking to work, and she stepped into a pothole in the street, and she twisted her ankle like really bad. She fell down, and it was pretty gnarly. She goes to the emergency room, and they treat her foot. And without even asking her, a different physician comes in and says, here's a bottle of Percocet or some other kind of pain medication. And she says, oh, no. I don't want that. I don't want that. Now, later I would tell her, you need to say, I have an addiction and do not put that in front of me. That would be a signal to the physician. It was like, oh, you know, but what ended up happening was she's like, oh, no, that's okay. I don't need it. And the physician's like, no, I need you to take this. It's like, this will help you with your pain. You need to take the medication. And she's like, no, that's okay. I'm okay. And the doctor's like, goes away. Someone else comes in. It's like, here's your medication. Like pushing the medication on her. This is her account. I don't know if it happened, but it sounded credible. And I think what she did was she was finally like, okay, fine. And she took it and then she just threw it away. And I was just like, whew, that was a close one, because that could be pretty awful, right? So my point is that you just have to be really careful about this kind of thing, particularly if you have ongoing emotional pain and traumas growing up. That's when it really raises the risk. But really anyone can become addicted to these things, right? The other thing is if you ever do have to take the medications, that you just really monitor it over time, and that you have a lot of support and a lot of protective measures in place to prevent you from doing that. Like one thing is to only work with one physician. Don't work with 10 different physicians regarding your pain management regimen, because if you start to medication seek, you start seeking medication outside you start playing different physicians off of each other, then they might start giving you too many medications. So if you're just working with one, they're just like, well, so you're asking for more pain medication. Let's try something else. There's a lot of other things you can do. Mindfulness, focus, exercise, stretching, relationships. Good, healthy relationships are associated with pain reduction, diet, all sorts of things. I'm saying all of that, and I'm also going to say that if you've never had chronic pain, then God bless you. You're lucky. And if you ever come across someone with chronic pain, like Kris, I want you to, depending on the situation, I want you to amplify your sympathy for this individual. Amplify your empathy, because when we have people with chronic pain, if you don't have even if you know what chronic pain is like, we are visual creatures. We don't see blood. There's no broken bone or anything. You see someone with like a broken bone, and all of it, like a football player that snaps a shin bone or something, all of us are just like, oh my God, like, oh, that's so painful. Or someone cuts themselves, like a paper cut, like in Everything Always at Once, Everything Everywhere Always at Once. It's like the whole movie, all this violence, but the one scene that got my wife was the paper cuts. and we evolved to empathize, particularly with pain. We're just like, oh my God, that's so painful. When you can't see chronic back pain and other kinds of chronic pain, there's no visual of it. What can happen is people with chronic pain can become more and more isolated, which of course is not fair to them and is awful. But also it can increase their pain because no one is there to support them, and they don't want to ask for support. They don't want to ask for accommodations with people. So you can care for people with chronic pain by making sure that you really embody. You have to kind of force yourself to really like, okay, I don't feel the pain that they're going through, but I have to really imagine what it's going through. One of the things that I do with friends and family members who I know suffer from chronic pain is it's literally the first question I ask them when I see them. I have a family member that I see at family gatherings, and one of the first things, I don't always, and that's probably not a great thing, but I will try and have asked her, how's your pain going? How are you feeling today? That kind of thing. I would have clients, and although that wasn't a goal in therapy, the pain management portion of it, I would always ask, how's the pain going? How's your body feeling? I've never had someone that didn't appreciate that question. Be like, oh, thanks for asking. Oh, yeah, well, it's pretty good today. Or, oh, it's bad. I feel, because people going through chronic pain, and really people going through chronic issues, whether it's chronic suicidality or chronic depression or chronic anxiety, they, over time, through stigma and people victim blaming them or whatever, they will learn that they just shouldn't talk about it. And they suffer in silence. You might even have a spouse that is like this. And you could do a lot of good by just asking, just paying attention. And you don't have to spend 3 hours talking about it. It's just one question, just like, how's the pain going? And they're like, it's not going great. It's actually, I feel. And one of the things that I will follow up with, even with family and friends, is I'll be like, so what are the symptoms right now? Because, if you've ever been through something bad, like you're sick or you have pain or something, it helps to talk about it. It helps to have it acknowledged. It helps to have someone care for you. It helps to have it out there in the open, because it's out there in the open to you as someone who's experiencing the pain. It's just no one else sees it as a thing. And it's just nice to have it in the room, right? Have it real. And so for Kris, it sounds like she has that. And now for the two of them, I don't know, maybe this will just be a one-off episode moment, but for the two of them, they have to work with this together. And I think Kris alluded to how she kind of told Jeymi about these issues, the narcolepsy, the chronic pain, but she hadn't really told her about it. And so I think that it's important. I don't know, maybe we'll never see this moment again, but yeah. So she's saying that the airplane really messed up her neck. And I don't know, but anecdotally, I find most people will be like, well, you should have done something to prevent it. You should have stretched, or you should have taken your medication, or you're just complaining too much. Like, the amount of stigma and blame and just ignoring it and all that to people going through chronic pain is the norm. And it's completely awful. It's immoral. It's wrong. It's born out of ignorance. It's also born out of everyone's desire to just not have to deal with things that they don't want to deal with. Like, I don't want to deal with your pain, so I just want to deny it exists entirely and don't bother me with it. And it's not okay.
Yay! This is what my doctor in America told me to get when my neck started hurting really bad here.
And you're hurt right now, or is for...
I've dealt with my neck.
So good. So Jeymi is actually asking, and she seems open, and she's taking her to the store. So Jeymi's doing a great job so far.
For years, it just got worse from the plane here.
Okay.
Yeah, I need surgery, but I chose not to have it.
Okay.
So I have to deal with significant pain in my neck.
Another thing is, this is just a little bit more, is that when you have a partner or a family member or someone, particularly if you're a partner because you're with them a lot, and they suffer from ongoing pain, is just to ask them what they need and what they want. If they just want to, they might want to ignore it themselves. They might be like, I don't want to focus on my back pain. I just want to enjoy today. I want to go to dinner. I want to hang out. I want to have date night or whatever. And that's what they want. Or they might just be like, I got to go home and I just want to lay in bed and I just want to cry. And then you're just like, do you want me to be with you? And they might be like, nah, just leave me alone in the room. No offense, but I'm just gonna cry by myself in the bedroom. I just need to just get away from everything. Or they might be like, yeah, I could, if you want to, do you want to watch something on television? I'll be in pain, but at least I won't be alone. Do you want to do that? So asking them what they want, right? Because sometimes there'll be these overreactions or underreactions. People will be like, well, let's have fun and you'll forget it. Or, okay, well, let's put you in bed. And the person's like, well, that's not really what I want. So always asking them, what's your impulse? What do you want to do right now? That's helpful.
I've been dealing with chronic neck pain for 21 years. And every year I get closer and closer to needing the surgery. I refuse to have it until I absolutely cannot turn my head.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a physician, but as someone with a back defect, as it's called, because of my broken bone, because of my football injury, there was a time when I was in chronic pain, and it was mild, but it was demoralizing and awful. Even at my minor level, it went away, thank God. I don't know why. I just went away. I thought, this is the rest of my life, and this sucks, but it went away. I have a feeling it'll come back, but who knows. And by the way, a lot of back pain has a major psychological component of trauma and of stress. It sounds like magical thinking, but it's not. It's shown in the data. In fact, there seems to be some data pointing towards most back pain. The major factor is stress and trauma recovery and this sort of thing. So it's just something to think about. But anyway, and don't quote me on that because I'm not up to date on the research. It's been a while since I've looked into it. But one of the things that the physicians would tell me, because I was like, well, should we do surgery? Like, let's just fix it and then everything will be okay. And they're like, well, actually, it's a bit of a myth that back surgery is this good thing. It could be a good thing, and it depends on the injury, of course, but there are a lot of risks. One, it could harm you. There are problems to your nerves or to your bones. It could make matters worse. Also, it could do nothing. In fact, research shows that with the procedures available to us regarding back surgery, the percentages aren't good. And so that's why I'm guessing for her, she's been advised. She's had this back pain for 21 years. So there's been talk about surgery or some kind of more drastic measure. And you know, don't get me wrong. There's some people post-surgery that their life completely is for the better. They have zero pain or very little pain, and they're just completely better off. But it's a roll of the dice, usually. Again, I'm not a physician. Talk to a doctor about this. But so I'm guessing that's where she's at. It's just like, well, I'm not at the point yet where I want to take that risk, where I want to roll the dice. But if it gets so bad, then I got to try something. And I can't live this way anymore. So I might as well just roll the dice and hope that it comes up at the very least neutral, and at best that it actually improves my life. So it sounds like she's not there yet, but she will be soon, it sounds like.
Why, for surgery? For surgery.
Surgery?
Yes.
To fix my neck, they have to put a metal bar around here and screw it into my head.
Okay.
And then bars down like this to hold my neck in place for a year.
Okay.
It's a big, big surgery. I'm talking over $100,000.
And then there's that the procedure would be extremely debilitating and annoying and concerning and expensive. But I would hope that she has insurance that would pay for that. But I can't know that for sure if she lives in the United States.
Creo que tengo muchas cosas que procesar. Es una operación que probablemente va a demorar un año, en donde ella no va a poder sostener por sí misma su cabeza. Aparte de eso está la narcolepsia, de alergia a la menta, y nos acabamos de conocer. In this moment, I don't know what to think about this.
Gracias.
Yeah, in the best of worlds, you would hope that JB would just be like, yeah, I'm in it to win it. I love her, and I'm going to make it work, and I'm going to take care of her. It's a bummer. I feel bad for her. The other part of this to be acknowledged is that Jeymi's life is also negatively impacted. And it's not selfish for Jeymi or people to acknowledge that in Jeymi. It's the same when it comes to if you have a partner with depression or PTSD, and not all the time, but it obviously affects the person of concern much more. It affects Kris, the pain, much more. But Jeymi is negatively affected too. And Jeymi deserves sympathy and care and support. and also empathy from Kris. Kris could say, hey, I know that this impacts you, and I'm sorry about that. As long as it's mutual, Jeymi's like, I'm so sorry you're going through pain. I wish I could take it away. I feel so bad for you. And Kris, thank you. And Jeymi, I'm so sorry that I'm going through this and it limits our, activities as a couple. So there's, just everyone taking care of each other is the thing. But so in the best of all worlds, Jeymi would be like, a minute to win it, everything's fine. It's not great, but we'll get through this together. But I don't know. There is something to be said for, because I'm often talking about on the show, you want to date a little longer than they often do on the show in person, so that you can really know if you're compatible and if it's going to work with personalities and with life goals, like having kids or where you're going to live, and families and cultures and religion and all that stuff. You just want to date for a while before you take the plunge, particularly when kids are involved. This is one of those things for Jeymi. There's a possibility that this is too much. It's just too much for her. It's not what it's overwhelming. There's something about Jeymi's personality or her goals in life or whatever that just makes it so that she just can't make this work. And she'll resent it too much. She will feel too limited. And it could be a major factor in Jeymi saying, yeah, you're a great person, but I don't know if I'm ready to be a part of that. And I think a lot of people would judge someone in Jeymi's position for saying that. And, maybe I'd be a part of that, I suppose. But if you're in Jeymi's position, you don't want to just headlong into it, figuring that you're going to get on board, and then the entire time you're upset. Now, couple therapy, individual therapy could help for sure, because there's a lot of beliefs or hiccups in a situation like that can get in the way that you could actually address or remove. But it is kind of a life choice. It is kind of a how do you see yourself? How do you see your life? And I don't know. I think people are entitled to make that choice for themselves as to whether or not they're willing to do that. And of course, for the Krises of the world, they only want people who are at least planning on being okay with being on board with that, right? For Kris, if she learned that Jeymi was just like, look, I love you, but I think I'm going to be so resentful of your issues that it'll completely destroy our love. It already kind of is. I would think that Kris would be like, well, that sucks and I'm angry at you, but I'm glad that you told me, because I would hate to get 5 years into our relationship and you're in a bad mood and you hate me the entire time. Like, I don't want that. So, it sucks that it puts people in that position, but it is something that Jeymi needs to consider. And it sounds like she's still waking up or realizing she's in a state of like, oh my God, I guess this is a lot bigger than I thought. And I wonder if I'm okay with that. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone, please take care of yourself, really, because you deserve it. You really, really do.